Hello, once more, and welcome back to Chairback on YouTube. Doing the 2025 Big Ten predictions here, week number 7, as we get into it here on this Thursday afternoon. Last week we went 5-2, which improves the record a bit. You can see that in the beginning of the video before I start talking to you about this week as we get into week 7. First matchup starting out Friday night in Seattle tomorrow night at Washington Husky Stadium. Washington Huskies 4-1, taking on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Rutgers this year, 2 losses, both to Iowa and Minnesota. Against Iowa, they gave up 38 and scored 28. Last week against Minnesota, they had a tough game as well. In that one against Minnesota last week. No, against 2 weeks ago against Minnesota for Rutgers, I guess. They scored 28 but gave up 31. Another game where they gave up 30 points and lost, and their second loss of the year for Rutgers. Going into it in Big Ten, going into it this week in Big Ten play. Tough part for Rutgers is they have to travel to Washington, a Washington team that's 4-1 this year. Washington last week, one on the road at Maryland. So Washington, I guess you could say, the Huskies adjusted to traveling to the East Coast this season. They have 4 wins on the year. One of them was an East Coast win, and one loss that was to Ohio State at home, though. But for this matchup coming up on a Friday night, it's going to be interesting to see how the Rutgers Scarlet Knights are going to handle Washington. Washington so far this year is tough. And seeing some highlights of them, they have a good quarterback. Looks like their game, they play better overall. And for Washington, I think that's really what their team looks like. And I think Washington comes away with a big win here to get to 5-1 and control their own with a win. And I really think if they controlled their own destiny after this point, as I do think they get a surprising win against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. So give me the Huskies for a win tomorrow night in primetime on Friday. In the first game of the week. Moving on, Saturday afternoon, we're going to Champaign, Illinois. The Buckeyes still remain unbeaten of Ohio State as they travel to Champaign to play the Illinois Fighting Illini, number 1 Ohio State against Illinois. Illinois ranked 17th last I checked. And one thing I'll say about this is this. Illinois coming into this matchup ranked for, who knows, the first time since when. Ohio State, they're always in the top 10. But looking at this matchup with 2 teams that are ranked in the top 25, I think this game could be one of the interesting Big Ten games to see. One of the top 2 Big Ten games this weekend that's going to happen here on Saturday. This one with Ohio State and Illinois. I think Illinois could keep this game pretty close in a game and maybe spoil Ohio State's unbeaten record. It's happened the last week. Maryland playing at home. Washington upset them and ended their unbeaten streak. For Ohio State, even though they're 5-0, they won 42-3 against Minnesota last week. I don't see Ohio State giving up more than 3 points. I think Illinois. I don't think Ohio State's going to give up less than 3 points this week. I do think Illinois is going to stay in this game majority of the game. I think this game can come down to being one of 2 ways, where it's going to depend on who makes mistakes. Whoever makes the most mistakes in this game is going to lose the game, ultimately. At the end of the day, I think Ohio State, though, pulls away in the fourth quarter with a late 2 score. I think Ohio State's going to pull away late in the fourth quarter and win it. But I do think Illinois keeps it close for a majority of the afternoon on a Saturday. So give me the Buckeyes don't win this one, as I do think the Buckeyes pick up a road win in Champaign on Saturday to stay unbeaten. Moving on. We have the Michigan State Spartans taking on the Bruins of UCLA. UCLA coming in 1-4 on the year. They snapped their losing streak. They upset Penn State last week. And Michigan State, the Spartans, Spartans, coming off a 38-27 loss to Nebraska last week. Both teams, Penn State coming off, UCLA coming off a 42-37 win, which was a really competitive game. UCLA, their first real competitive game on the year last week, where they picked up the first one of the year and beat Penn State over on the last play of the game, getting Penn State to make mistakes. For UCLA, it's their quarterback, the transfer from Tennessee, who's Nico, who's come alive. But that's only one game for the first one. I think this week reality starts to sink in for UCLA because they have to go to Michigan State 3 time zones all the way to the Eastern time zone. I think that's going to affect them quite a bit this week. And unfortunately, I think Michigan State pulls it away, and I think UCLA falls right back down to reality after winning their first game of the season. I think the Spartans find a way to get the job done this week. So give me the Michigan State in this one as I think Michigan State will beat UCLA on Saturday. Moving on, our next one, the best matchup, I believe, overall this weekend in the Big Ten. 5-2 Oregon after a bye week, after beating Penn State a few weeks ago, 24 in double overtime. And the Indiana Hoosiers coming off a win 2 weeks ago against Iowa in a 20-15 win, a game that I was at. Which the crazy part of that Iowa Indiana game I was at a few weeks ago was the quarterback, Fernando Mendoza for Indiana, run back to the back of the end zone and out of the end zone to get a safety to give Iowa 2 points at the end of the game. I did read the story about it. Why? They called a delay. Their coaching staff for Indiana called a delay victory formation, which I think is kind of interesting, but who knows really what it means. I don't even know what it means, but look at this matchup overall. Indiana and Oregon, two teams that make it the college football playoffs last year out of the 4 Big Ten teams that were in it. Two teams that each lost their first games. Indiana lost to Notre Dame in the first round. Oregon lost their game in the Rose Bowl to Ohio State, who ended up winning the championship, even though they were 13-0. Look at this one, though. Oregon, Indiana. This one, I think, might turn into mirror images of last year's Oregon-Ohio State game in Eugene, where it's going to be a 1.5 win for Oregon, maybe, or Indiana, whichever you think. I do think there's going to be a big game. Two quarterbacks who are really good. I think Oregon's going to make some plays, and I also think Indiana's going to make some plays. At the end of the day, I see Oregon coming out on top, the defending Big Ten champions. I see them winning again, getting to 6-0, getting to bowl eligible on the year. So give me the Ducks in this one with a surprising pick here this week as I take the Ducks of Oregon against Indiana. Moved on. Nebraska traveling to Maryland on Saturday. The Huskers coming off a win against Michigan State, 38-27. And Maryland coming off a 24-20 loss to Washington. Again, Maryland had the lead in last week from wondering of it, but at the end of the day, Washington came away and found a way to pick up a big win. Overall, I do think it's one of those games where this week, Nebraska and Maryland, two teams that are coming off games where one of them won and the other one lost. I think Maryland, they're going to have to set their stories up and try to get a big win this week, and which I think they can do. But unfortunately, I think Nebraska, they're a team that they know how they're playing better this year. Nebraska does look like a team that might win some games this year, maybe crash the college football playoff. We'll have to wait and see. At the end of the day, though, I think Nebraska comes away with this game in a close one against Maryland. Maybe a 2-score game, maybe by 10, maybe by 14. We'll see. But I'm taking Nebraska in this one here on Saturday afternoon. So give me the Huskers against Maryland on the road this week. Moving on. We have Penn State and Northwestern, the Northwestern Wildcats. Wildcats traveled to Happy Valley, Penn State. Penn State coming in after losing 42-27 Ohio State. And for Penn State, though, this matchup against Northwestern, Penn State, they're coming off a loss, 42-37 to UCLA. And they're also coming off a double overtime loss as well. So back-to-back losses for Penn State to ruin their unbeaten season when they were all the 3-0. And looking at it going to week 7 for Penn State, it's turnaround week for Northwestern. That's also a matchup they won last week, 42-7, and also 17-15 against UCLA a few weeks ago. And overall, I think this game for Penn State, this is really a matchup where they need to turn things around. For Northwestern, though, I don't think that's going to happen this week. I think Penn State's going to find a way to get the job done. But it might turn into one of those games where these two teams fight it out. We'll have to wait and see. But I think Penn State ultimately snaps the 2-game losing streak and gets back into the win column on Saturday. So give me the Penn State and Indiana Lions for a win against Northwestern. Moving on. Madison, Wisconsin. We can do this. The Hawkeyes and the Badgers. Big Ten teams, two powerhouse Big Ten teams who are old school Big Ten rivals. These two teams have played a lot over the years. We're playing for the Heartland Trophy, a trophy matchup for a trophy game. Interesting to see the most point of this one, Northwest for Wisconsin and Iowa, both teams. Wisconsin falling on hard times this year so far, losing 24-10 against Michigan last week. A few weeks ago, Wisconsin losing to Alabama on the road. And for Iowa, they're coming off a loss to Indiana 20-15, their second loss of the year. Both these two teams are two teams that, the question is, who's going to win? These two teams usually have tight ends, fullbacks, quarterbacks, running backs, you name it. They use everyone. They use every one of those offensive positions. And the question is, who's going to show up to play this week? Because both these teams are on bad streaks right now, and both these teams need to find ways to play better football, I think. And if you ask me, this matchup's has really gone one-sided the last 3 years. Iowa's won the last 3 meetings. Wisconsin, the games where Wisconsin has had a chance. Last year was a 42-10 win for Iowa against Wisconsin, and the year before that it was like 14-0 for Iowa, or something like that, where Iowa played good games, and Iowa has put up some really tough games against Wisconsin in the past. These two teams have played games where it's one score in the past, and one of them wins. It's just one of those games where it's going to be interesting to see who comes out this week and actually plays good football. Overall, this one, I do think it's going to come down to which team makes the least amount of mistakes. For Wisconsin, they need to make the least amount of mistakes, and so does Iowa, ultimately. At the end of the day, I do see Wisconsin coming away with a win at home. Playing at home, I just think Wisconsin just might be a little bit better playing at home against Iowa. I think Mark Gronowski, Iowa's quarterback, if he's going to go and start, which he will, I think, we'll have to win and see. Hopefully he doesn't make mistakes like he did against Indiana. We'll have to win and see, though. But I think Wisconsin gets a win and snaps the 3-game losing streak against Iowa in the series history this weekend. Moving on to the next game out west, the USC Trojans, Michigan Wolverines. Let's do this. Michigan coming in on the road. USC coming in as well. USC, after losing a few weeks ago to Illinois, really in a 34-32 loss, a game that USC could have won, but gave up a field goal last second to lose. It's another week where USC has to play good football this week against Illinois, against Michigan. Michigan last year beat USC in the Big House. USC was the first Big Ten team, the first new Big Ten team to travel east and have the East Coast issues last year. And for Michigan, that was a big win. And for this year, this game is going to be one of those games. It's going to be a great game to see. We'll have to wait and see how it happens. I think Michigan pulls out the win and maybe beats USC for a second straight year. Because USC last year looked bad against Michigan. I think Michigan does the same thing they did last year and beats them in a close game this time around out west in the Coliseum in LA. Moving on to our last game of the night. Coming up on Saturday, we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers and the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue, Minnesota. Minnesota coming off a loss, 42-3 to Ohio State, and Purdue coming off a 43-27 loss to Illinois. The storyline of this game, I think, is for Minnesota is they're going back up, so Minnesota should not have many issues. For Purdue, on the other hand, giving up 43 points to Illinois and losing, but scoring 27. If Purdue can play one of those games where they give up maybe 40 points again and still score 20 points a game, they should be just fine. You can do that if you can lose games, but it's all about having fun, personally, from what I think. At the end, I think Minnesota coming back off a 42-3 loss, I think Minnesota's going to be pissed off. And I think they're going to turn it around after winning the week before 31-28 against Rutgers. And I think for Minnesota, it's all about home cooking. And I think that's what happens this week with the Gopher win on Saturday night. So there you have it, 2025 Week 7 Big Ten predictions of the Week 7 Big Ten prediction quick version coming up here shortly. After that, I'll have the final. So I'll have the Big Ten prediction Week 7 recap halfway done after Saturday night's games are finished. I'll have the recap Saturday night, hopefully, or Sunday morning. Don't know yet when. So stay tuned for that as well. Hope you everyone enjoyed. Please remember to watch, like, subscribe, and don't forget to tell your friends to do the same if they've not done so already. And also, don't forget to hit that notification button below so you know when there's a new video on the channel. With that being said, have a good day, stay safe, and peace out. I'll see you right back here next week for Week 8 as we get to the second half of the season. 7 weeks to go after this week. It's going to be a fun ride. Have a good day, stay safe, and peace out, everyone. See you next time. Bye for now.